Rusty first told me that we're going to keep this brief, we're not going to have a lot of slides, and then all of a sudden now there's about 300 slides.
He started it. He had 12, now he has 18. So.
He's bigger than you.
I am scared.
So I want to share something, not to get a little sappy, but I was really excited about this when Rusty asked me to kind of participate in this, because Rusty taught my first CO2 class 12 years ago. So when he asked me to kind of participate with this, I was screaming like a little girl. I was really excited.
That's a lie.
Nothing to do with that.
So, case is running warm. We're going to talk about case controllers. You know, one of the first things you want to do is kind of grab the discharge air temperature of the case at the rack controller. Check and graph the superheat and pull the temperature. You know, sometimes you get a high temperature alarm. It could be maybe someone opened up a door, or maybe an air conditioner is coming on at a certain time, actually causing a little bit of infiltration. Starting to look at when the temperature did start to rise and how long it's been running warm. If they're missing the defrost and how long it's actually been in defrost, and how did it actually get into the defrost. Sometimes, usually we have it on a time, right? And sometimes in some of the case controllers, because we deal with 20 different manufacturers, it could also be a demand defrost. What's the superheat of the case? Remember the controller is calculating the superheat using the suction pressure transducer and the suction line temperature probe. Also make sure all your sensors are calibrated and reading correctly. Don't leave an offset in the controller. This isn't a Friday call, so we can't just put an offset and just bounce. Your diagnosis and your controller operation is only as good as your readings. So everything has to be working. If the controller is supposed to be operating at an 8-degree superheat and it's getting lied to based off the numbers, where it's not actually calculating the right superheat, you're not going to have a proper operation of that actual system. You can still check the superheat with a gauge and a temperature probe manually. Recommend always doing this at the actual case itself, at the case controller, because sometimes a lot of the energy management systems that you have, there's a little bit of a lag. So just because, up all the way up at the E2, E3, E255, 880, that system is reading X, doesn't mean that it's the actual true blue reading. So recommended that you actually go to the actual case controller when you're doing so. When replacing a temperature sensor, make sure you use the correct temperature sensor for the controller that you're using. Not all temperature sensors are interchangeable. I will say there is BAPI is a manufacturer that makes sensors for everybody. And so there is something called a 10K2, and there's also a 10K3. So not all 10Ks are equal, right? They have different curves, and it might interfere with your defrost operation as well as your actual case temperature. Once you have the case information, you can start your investigation. All that stuff is out there somewhere. The ABCs of troubleshooting. No, I'm not talking about Sesame Street. I'm talking about air before charge. That's what you're going to check first. Airflow is most important. Once you have the information, and this is where you get the information from, a lot of the manufacturers have IOM manuals, installation operation manuals. All that spec will be there, what your airflow is supposed to be. Typically with air conditioning, we do CFM. In this instance, we typically do FPM, feet per minute. If that feet per minute is not right, it will affect everything else down the line as far as your diagnostic properties. And good isn't a form of measurement. I don't know how many times guys have called me and it's like, yeah, the airflow's good. What's good? As you start to check the case operation, remember what you need to check. Airflow, first. Next is your saturated suction temperature. Every case has a spec saturated that it's supposed to. Sorry, I forgot about that. I told him to bring this, and obviously I forgot it. So if you're not under 40 years of age, you don't know what the hell this is. This is an Alan Moore Jr. This is how the old school technicians used to check for airflow. Now we have the Testo 410i, which is right over there. That is what we're going to use in order to check the airflow to make sure it's actually correct. If you do not check that with that type of device or an anemometer, and you just call it good, you're probably going to have a problem later on down the line. Once again, sorry, saturated suction temperature, we want to make sure that's within tolerance of what the case spec is supposed to be, and that's why checking airflow is so important. If that fan is moving way too fast, it could potentially raise the pressure, which is going to throw off your saturated. All right. Same thing with the next thing that we're going to talk about is superheat. Once you have your airflow correct and the saturated suction is exactly where, or at least within 2 to 3 degrees of what it's spec'd for in that IOM manual, the next thing to check is the superheat. It's really easy to do. If you have, I made this up, I'm gonna take credit for it because I never heard this before, so it's Brett's triangle and I called it. So we have airflow, SST, and superheat. Any 3 of these things fail, triangle collapses, and the case does not work. I had an instance where I had someone say that the airflow was good, and the next technician went there with a manometer the next day, checked the airflow, and the airflow was actually running 360 feet per minute on a case that was supposed to be only running 180. It was running double the amount of airflow. And essentially the symptom that he had was that the SST was way too high. It had like a 5-pound pressure drop within the system. Well, if he would have listened to what I said, ABCs, he would have figured out, once he checked the airflow, it's like, well, let's run a little fast. Essentially what happened was, the fan got replaced in the middle of the night, because fans never fail during the day, it's always 2 o'clock in the morning. So if he would have checked that, he would have been a lot happier camper. Case running warm, it's just the facts. You must have proper airflow in order to get the case down to temperature, like we just discussed. Visually check the coil and see if the fans are running. Is the coil's iced up or is the drain plugged?
Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I'm passing it around, so I will pat everybody down if I don't have my stuff back.
All right.
So, I'm just passing around, I never look, there's an Alnor, there's a Tesco. No, I will put you down.
Sometimes the other reason why we want to inspect the coil is to see what the frost pattern looks like. If you had a case that went, started going up in temperature because of, the frost pattern was only half the coil, high probability is maybe that the superheat is high for some odd reason, even though the controller might be saying, hey, we're running good superheat. Well, if you didn't check to calibrate your sensors at first, that might be lying to you and then gives you a false operation, how the thing's actually supposed to run. Do you have good airflow in the honeycombs? Like what word again? Good. Do you have the correct airflow, right? Is it per the IOM in there? If anyone's here from Husband, you need to start putting that in your manuals, just saying.
I just wrote it down, man.
I don't know how many times they're like, I have a Husband case, I'm like, I don't know, check the one that's working and see what it is, and versus the other one. Usually, like like on Hill Phoenixes, you typically have a little number, 5, 1, something, give you a little notation of something special about that airflow. And they'll say that airflow is only true blue. You're gonna get an accurate reading exactly after defrost, after the coil is entirely clear. So you can't just, it's been running for 4 hours, I'll check it. Yeah, it's good. That might be because it's iced up and someone put a higher fan in there, giving you a faulty reading. So it's after defrost is when you need to check that, when the coil is entirely clear. Fans are not running. Is the fan plugged in? Fan blade broken. Make sure that you check the fan blade, pitch, and RPM. A lot of these motors, you have ECM motors. They're little ECM motors, and they'll turn that plastic motor around. I hate to keep saying this word, but Hill Phoenix. When you turn around some of these motors, they have a little hole in the back that looks like a battery cover. There's actually a probe in there that you can actually put in there to see exactly what the actual RPM is programmed for. Just because it says 1500 doesn't mean it's running 1500. Also, helpful tip, read the instructions and make sure the motor is not plugged in when you push in that little thing, because it hurts things badly. I was like, why wouldn't they put that? Oh, it's on there. Fan's not running. Is the proper voltage to the fan? Is the case controller calling for it to be on? If not, check the voltage in the case controller, fan relay, and make sure there is no voltage. If there is no voltage out and voltage in, check the fan relay or case controller. Also, you have to remember it also has to do with some of the programming. Some of these Husband cases, they require the fan relay to be on even during defrost. And actually what switches that is what I call the fan-pan relay. It gets an electric signal from the defrost heaters and switches that power going to the fan over to the actual fan heater itself. Also, in some of the programming in some of these case controllers, the way the fans are brought back on also might interfere with how that pan heater is on. So if you have a case where it's a continual, where it's frosting up or icing up in the bottom of the pan, Just because it was on when you started the defrost doesn't mean it's gonna be on within 5 minutes. So periodically check it to make sure there's something in the program that's not actually kicking out or kicking on that fan relay. If you must replace a fan motor, always try to replace the fan motor with the same one that you're replacing with. Manufacturers stop using all these crazy fan motors. If you must temporarily use a different motor, once we need to get the proper fan motor, put that one in. Just because they sell those baskets at United Refrigeration, it's a 1500 RPM fan motor, doesn't mean that, oh, it's good for now. Because that might be the issue, why you might have an issue later on down the line. Once again, you must have the proper airflow in order to get the case temperature. If there is no airflow because the coil is iced up, manually defrosting a coil, I would recommend actually, once again, looking at the coil to see what the frost pattern looked like. It might give you some hints of what's actually going on. Example, if you have a system that's B15 here and B14 here, they might not be going in defrost at the same time. So if you don't have a divider between that case, what's going to happen? Humid hot air is going to go into one side, and it's just going to keep going until each one of those sides is not fully defrosting. When cleaning or defrosting a coil, shut down the liquid line or the EEV off, leave the suction line open, and start defrosting the coil. Before you start touching any cases, especially since we're talking about CO2, double, triple check the check valves that are inside those cases. There's a certain percentage, I think about 20%, if you talk to any construction person, they'll tell you that a lot of times, 20% of them usually get done on a Friday or Monday. So a lot of times during construction, if they don't check it, you might have some that are backwards, and that's a safety hazard for you, especially if you're not paying attention. When you are pumping the system down, especially on a frozen food, you could potentially open up the doors, kind of assist to let that liquid boil out before you start defrosting that coil. If you're manually defrosting a coil, do not just clear the coil and leave. You must find out why it actually iced up. Misty?
Excuse me, Brett,
Yeah.
what was that you just said? I didn't quite catch that. Could you please repeat that louder for everybody to hear?
Which part? You must find out why the coil was frosted? That part?
That part.
Okay.
Preach it, brother.
Someone asked me the one time, they're like, why do you like to share the information, everything that you know? Inherently, because I'm lazy. I'd rather have someone else pass along that knowledge and be able to actually utilize it. Because at 2 o'clock in the morning, nothing is the worst than just being there. It's like, I don't know the answer. I don't know why this thing is breaking. So I'd rather just want everyone to know everything that I know. But yes, we need to find out why. Missed defrost because of a controller schedule. Program incorrectly. Sometimes cases need the fans on during defrost. You know, the fan pan relay heater that we were talking about. Missing voltage to a case controller. Could be low voltage too. If that voltage is, you know, if it's being designated to go into a defrost and maybe it's losing communication, maybe it might miss a defrost because of a low voltage situation for the supply of that case controller. Defrost contactor did not pull in maybe. Bad defrost heaters, check the amp draw while it's in defrost, including the pan heaters. Like I said, check it, but then check it again and check it again. Because you might find, you know, if you just check it the first time, you're like, well, it was on. Well, maybe it was only on for like 5 minutes and then you missed why it pulled out, right? Air infiltration, doors left open, usually in a freezer box. Other reasons why that thing might ice up. Check graphs to see if there's a pattern. A lot of times you can figure out commonality, right? Well, this whole lineup, you know, ended up not defrosting properly. So maybe there was a main solenoid that wasn't stopping during the defrost that caused that, or if it's just one particular case. Look at the whole big picture. Don't get tunnel vision and, you know, focus on one thing. Kind of take a step back sometimes. And also the other advice that I can give you is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. It doesn't need to be an Einstein fix, okay? A lot of times you can just keep it simple and then go back to the refrigeration basics. It's just refrigeration. Even though it's CO2, we're still doing the same damn thing. We're removing heat, okay? Don't get, oh, it's high pressure. Yes, it is. But it's still, in essence, it's a DX process. Coil has no or little or no frost on, see,
Is that English?
no, I changed it and then I like distributor.
Oh. Is that you or me?
That was you, I fixed it, and then I don't know what happened.
Fixed it again.
It's on the disruptor tube. They're on the return bends of the coil.
That's how we spelled it when I was a kid.
There you go.
So remember, on the distributor, you know, and you'll see a picture later, typically right where the actual distributor tubes are, right, that's where the nozzle is. You shouldn't have any frosting in between the expansion valve and that nozzle. The frosting should happen directly on those distributor tubes themselves. Check to ensure the EEV coil is energized. If not, checking the voltage at the case controller, making sure that you have a steady voltage on the income pins and the voltage on the output pins is pushing on or off. One of the things that you can check as well, these are typically for the pulsing valves, they are solid state controls. Make sure that when they are closed that you have no resistance. Maybe it has, it's putting a little bit of resistance on there, which is not giving the coil the full power that it intends in order to, you know, open up that actual plunger. Check to ensure that you have liquid to the EEV. The usual suspects are plugged liquid line dryer. Check for a temperature difference across the filter dryer. I know with CO2 sometimes it can be difficult because you might have copious amounts of ice on liquid line. Still check. If we have more of a temperature drop than 1 degree, I'll go with 1. If you have more than 1 degree, that means we're flashing something off before it actually gets to the expansion device itself. Pulse width modulation. Pulse valve. EEV is energizing, but no temperature change across the valve. Check the internal valve strainer. If plugged, clean, or replace. If you open up a pulse valve to clean out the strainer, you must replace the stainless steel crush ring. Some are stainless steel. Some manufacturers use a rubber ring. If you are going to open that up, make sure that you have replacements on your truck. If you don't come crying to me, I don't know what to do, it won't stop leaking. Now you're gonna have to isolate the case for the night. If you must open up the system to repair the case, you must pull a proper vacuum. No blow and goes. Not that we've been doing that, right?
Never.
Never.
Liars.
I know. You all have brown eyes, I can see it right from here. Remember, CO2, all vacuums must be broken with vapor with suction pressure, because obviously if we put liquid in a system and we, you know, because it has such a low, high triple point, it could potentially turn into dry ice. I know on some walk-ins, sometimes they have a suction check valve after the actual valve station. In those instances, sometimes you have to go to another case adjacent, run a 100-foot hose to get vapor over in order to break that vacuum. Because they have a check valve, a lot of walk-in freezes, if you're not aware. It's a lot of spec in different states where if they have a leak in a walk-in box so someone doesn't suffocate, they have to be able to shut off the valve and also prevent the suction gas from going in there so you don't suffocate. Sometimes that's being done instead of with a mechanical valve, sometimes that's done with a check valve. So in those instances where you open up the suction, you're like, pressure's not going up, ball valve's broken. Now, typically you look for a check valve, but the check valve will be right after that whole valve station. Valves operate on a 6-second pulse. Valve percentages equal the duty cycle. 50% valve position equals 3 seconds on and 3 seconds off. That doesn't mean that if it's on for 100%, it's going to be 6 seconds on and then another 6 seconds off. No, it's just going to stay 6 seconds on, 6 seconds on if the superheat is elevated above its set point. Valve percentage of 85% equals 5 seconds. I'm glad Rusty fixed that because apparently I couldn't math earlier. Valve percentage of 15% equals 1 second on. The valve is typically set for about 15% for 2 minutes and 30 seconds for post defrost. This is just to get the initial flow through that coil. So we want to remove all the heat that we just added to that unit, putting it into a defrost. No questions? Like,
Yeah, am I supposed to connect an oscilloscope?
What's that? For seconds?
Yeah.
1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Miss it, and that's it. That's super weird. Coil has little or no frost in the distributor tube, and we're on the return bends of the coil. Check to ensure the EEV is opening up. Now we're talking about pulse or bipolar steppers right now. When using a stepper EEV, you must check to see if the case controller is calling for the valve to operate and what percentage the valve is at. Check at the rack controller. You can check at the rack controller, preferably you want to do it right at the case controller if it has a display. Because like I had stated before, a lot of times there is a delay between what the controller is actually showing and what the controller locally is actually going to show you. You can use a bipolar valve driver to check and see if the valve can be opened or closed manually, or open and close it at the rack controller manually to check to see if the valve will open and close. That also might be another reason why a valve is not fully seating and why you might actually have an iced up coil. A lot of times, a lot of these valves have an overcloser percentage, and I'll go through that in a minute, but just remember that for right now. Some stepper valves also come with a stator magnet to use to open up manually. Carell is one of these manufacturers. A lot of ones do not. The stator and stem is all in one, like on the Sporlan and Danfoss expansion valves. A stepper EV will also have a normally closed solenoid that shuts to be energized anytime the case has power. Also, now a lot of the bipolar stepper controllers actually have a battery backup. So if they do lose power, just like the HPV and the BGV controller, where when they lose power, they have a battery backup in order to assist to close that valve, a lot of these case controllers do have that as well. If you must open up the system repair, you must pull a proper vacuum, no blow and go. Remember, with CO2, all vacuums must be broken with vapor and suction pressure. Why is it so important that we not blow and go, besides it being illegal? Why? What's going to happen if we have moisture in a CO2 system? Carbonic acid. We want to stay away from that. I don't want to change compressors. If you like changing compressors, it's up to you.
Non-condensables as well.
Absolutely. The SCR AA, and this is the valve driver. If this is gone, someone might have bodily harm.
There it is. Not mine. Mine just stopped working.
The SCR, so I'm going to talk about this one. The SCR AA and A are bipolar stepper valves that are suitable for use in subcritical and transcritical CO2 and another HFC chemical refrigerants. Oh my goodness. The valve has two motor windings that have a resistance on this particular type of motor. They have 100 ohms per winding, and that's from red to green and black to white. There are some different manufacturers that have different resistances. And same thing with the next thing I'm about to tell you. This valve in particular has 2,500 steps from open to close and set for a step rate of 200 steps per second. That means that it's going to take from 0 to 100%. That valve should essentially take 12.5 seconds to fully open and also fully close. Except for the fact that we have a 10% overclosure. What does that mean? That means in order to make sure that that valve finds its way home, to make sure it's fully seated, we close an additional 10%, and I'm not good at math, but I think that's 250 additional steps to make sure that that is programmed properly as well. One other thing I do want to mention about this, bless you, SCR AA is the smallest valve that Sporlan makes. And a lot of times on Hussman cases and Hill Phoenix OWIZ cases, that BTU is like 2,900 BTUs or 2,600, something minute. If you take that CO2 valve and you run it through the mobile app to try to figure out what the sizing of that valve is, that expansion valve might actually be at like a ton. So sometimes if you see valves prematurely fail, sometimes what it takes is not messing with the steps, but messing with the valve percentage to make sure it's not going, so a lot of times you'll see a valve go 0 to 100, 0 to 100. It's just wearing out that valve trying to modulate superheat. And we all know in mechanical refrigeration, what is that an issue? That's usually a valve hunting because it's so oversized. Still refrigeration, still can happen in this aspect as well. The EV control will typically do the following operation because most commercial TCO2 booster supermarkets do not have EPRs. Not saying that they don't, but most of them they do not. So because they're not being able to control the suction pressure, there's a lot of times where that thing is going to pull down temp, shut off, and then come back up in temp, and then just keep operating. The case will maintain the programmed superheat until the case hits the desired discharge air set point, and then basically either shut off entirely or shut off to a minimum percentage to keep flow throughout that coil. Depends on who programmed it. The expansion valve will close at a lower percentage to give you a higher super rate at the case, so that the case does not pull down any lower than what the discharge air set point is. Remember, the case defrost specs are only for when the case is running at the desired conditions. Dale's the one that told me that. Blame Dale. So if you have a case, essentially that's running, I'm sorry, I'll get there in a second, I just jumped. This means, remember the case defrost, running desired conditions, sorry. This also means that at the higher ambient of 75 degrees and 55% relative humidity, if it's higher than that case, than what that case spec is, then it could actually end up causing issues with it, frosting up, because it's more moisture within that case than what the manufacturer desired. This also means that if the case is designated for running at a 26-degree saturated suction, and you're running at it all the way down to an 18-degree saturated suction, there's a high probability that you will hear a lot more moisture, which means if it was supposed to be spec'd to defrost at 20 minutes and you see after 40 minutes of defrost time, within 20 minutes, the temperature starts to rise because it's completely iced and frosted over. High probability is because you're actually running lower saturated than what that case was actually spec'd for. I know a lot of times, if you're trying to get program changes done, and you try to be like, well, it needs to be more, and they're like, well, no, that's what works, whatever. Make sure you have some ammunition as far as theory on why that you actually have to make that change.
Sorry. The swag. Not swag, I mean, you can't keep it. Does anybody know what this is? Is it digital what? Anybody know what this is?
Lightsaber.
Look. I didn't even know how to do it. Hey, radio shack up for $12. So, anybody, like you said earlier, the ones with. I know it only happens when I'm showing off. So for those who don't know what I don't even know if you can buy these anymore. What is this? A sling cyclometer. Is this better than my digital? Yes. As an old dude, I am going to say 100%. Because digital, you're just going to hit it, push the button, and call it good. Yeah. Those who know how to use this, is that good?
Yes.
Well, also make
If I just do this, is that good?
No.
So your arm hurts.
Yeah.
Until you have to switch to the other arm. Yes?
Yes.
You must have a clean sock. One I just threw away was dirty. That's my excuse. But I'm just saying, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but I did want to make sure these get used. They are not nunchucks.
Actually, also with those, you're actually supposed to use distilled water.
Distilled water is a must. Yes?
Yes.
And a clean sock is a must. And water in the cap is a must. And you must do it in front of the case you're checking. If you're looking at the dairy case, don't walk over to the bakery case and swing the store. And then, what? Can I get an amen? Amen. All right. Damn, wake up. All right, so again, bodily harm. I have big friends. So, I'm taking a chance.
Also make sure, we could have a problem with the case icing up, particularly frozen food, if the humidity sensor and temperature sensor within the store that might be controlling the anti-sweats is not actually checked and calibrated properly, because that might affect with how cold the door frame is gonna get, which essentially could cause ice to form in the doorway, which might prop it open, which might cause more humidity to go into that case.
Question.
Yes?
When I show up the store, humidification, you keep the store open.
Well, let's just say the temperature, the humidity sensor, it was a Friday call, and they're like, oh, offset.
When you walk in, then all your reach close to you.
Agreed, 100%. So it could, well, is it because of the actual controlling source of it, or is it because
like this? Oh, why not?
no, understood. And that's why you're checking that, right?
The same.
So what would you believe, the sling or the transducer?
Sling.
The sling, of course, because
If
it's
you
more
wanna
accurate.
pass the
That's
flash,
calibrated.
you ask for sling.
It's more accurate.
Explain it to us.
We use R&D.
Huh?
In R&D, that's what we use.
It's been years since I've done that.
I haven't been in R&D in 20 years, but.
Sounds good.
So here's an example of what a pulse width valve with a block screen would potentially look like. See how the frosting is happening all the way up to where the cup actually sits inside the body of the valve. Like I stated before, the frosting should actually happen right there at the distributor tubes, right where the nozzle meets there. If you see it happen before then, there is something going on. Could be a lack of refrigerant. Could also be that the valve is maybe not opened up all the way. Here's some examples of some isolate coils. You can see that the frosting was starting to happen all the way back here. And you can also see if this is frozen, you can just already assume that you have high superheat. Because look, if we're at a negative 20 degrees saturated and I got nothing here, that tells me I have a crap ton of superheat going there. When pumping down a system, in order to service it, we want to shut off the liquid line first. We want to make sure that we get all that liquid out. How do you know? Huh? Well, you can gauge it up, yeah, but how do you know that all that liquid is gone?
Shut off your suction, make sure you don't see it rise. If you see it rise, open the suction back up, make sure it's off.
There we go. That's what I was looking for. Anyone didn't hear that? It's once you shut down the suction, once you assume that all the liquid is gone, if the suction pressure continues to rise, or the pressure rise in there, high probability that you still have liquid within that case. Those are your valves. Those are the ones that I said, check every single time you work on a case. Yes, it's an extra 5 minutes to make sure the check valves are in the proper location and proper directions. But make sure. One day you're going to thank me. Because remember, CO2 has a very high expansion rate, right? So if I'm coming over and I got liquid in there and I isolate it and I didn't follow the procedure I was supposed to, and I just start hitting that with 87-degree water, what's going to happen? I could have a leak event, right? Small one. There's, as Paul Burnett would say, there's little reliefs on every single U-bend of all those coils. And but just to let you know, they're not resettable. So just to let you know.
When they go, it's a garment changing event.
Yeah, make sure. All right, CO2 case shut-off valves. Once again, make sure that you are checking these to make sure that they are in the proper direction. Your check valve should always be faced in the direction of the rack to make sure that if the pressure in the coil goes up higher than what the pressure is on the other side, it wants to vent in that other direction. Sometimes you will see Sporlan valves that are internally checked, so make sure that you check those out in RTFM. Read that manual and make sure that you look to see how those operate as well. Remember when isolating, what's that? Oh, that's one of the questions. Remember when isolating CO2, remember there's about 6.5 psi per degree of temperature change. That's a lot. That water coming out of that water heater to de-ice that frozen food is not at a low temperature. If you have to do any servicing, once you do pump it down, we're back in the days of R12. We can pump it down to full vapor and de minimis release the rest of the vapor CO2 that we have left in that case.
Maximus.
The Maximus, I guess, yeah. Once we do that, we can take off the solenoid stem. You could potentially take, drop the power to the case controller, or you could use your 11-in-1 in order to, put that within the coil, so if it does start up, it doesn't burn out the actual solenoid. But don't do it.
That was a great recovery.
Change the pulse valve strainer. When you're doing this, make sure that you're using 2 wrenches. I don't want, if I ever see anyone working on any system, regardless if it's CO2, chemical refrigerant, I don't care. Use 2 valves when you're taking anything apart. 2 valve wrenches. Second recovery. because, before we're dealing with a lower pressure, maybe 10 pounds of suction, 15 pounds of suction, now we have 200. Oh, wet now.
I'm keeping it real.
You're throwing that back in after you just dropped in the case that has a whole bunch of water in it after you've done de-icing it?
Do as they say, not as they do.
Unbelievable. Make sure that you have the rebuild kits for any of these. So if you have a store, they have Danfoss, they have Squirrelin expansion valve, pulse width expansion valve. Make sure you have the rebuild kits. You're gonna thank me. That goes with any type of valve that you are going to rebuild, even HPV, BGB. Make sure that you actually have the rebuild kit before you attempt taking that thing apart. And there's the filter we're putting back in after getting wet. No, the rebuild kit typically comes with a brand new strainer that you can put back in there. A lot of times it also comes with a whole bunch of little stuff that you can throw out, the new nozzles. Go ahead.
Do you have a part number of the old screens, not those?
The one that has
Bigger ones?
not on me. I can find it.
What's that?
The part number for the old screens, those are the newer ones.
Those are the new ones. I have the
Yeah.
the older ones, if you have the older valves.
Yeah.
One of the big things, real quick, I'm sorry.
No.
One of the things about the new ones, did you know, quick to the next slide. You notice can you see the plastic, the hard plastic around it?
Yeah.
The reason they did that, so they don't fall apart as easy, but have you noticed the decibel level? Noise level in the clips? So the mass, that plastic has a certain degree of mass, and that mass is absorbing some of the sound. So what they did is it's tougher, but they're also trying to reduce the dB level so people can't hear it.
Click, 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 click. Through.
Yeah, I can't hear it either way without my doing it, so I don't care. Oh, it's me?
There you go. Come on.
Woo! That was good, wasn't it?
Good job, man.
No wonder he has the most listened to podcast in refrigeration. Can I get an amen? Amen. All right.
What's the name of that podcast?
Advanced Refrigeration Podcast. Every time I say it, I get $5. So I will be saying it like a mug the rest of the day. All right. So, and I agree, Brett did a great job, yes?
Yes.
And one of the things we want to make sure, I want to make sure, you all know that, and I said it earlier today, and I'll do it again today. If I'm using CO2, what kind of expansion valves do I have? Mechanical? No. Unipolar, bipolar, and pulse, yes? If I'm using an electronic valve, what do I need? A case controller. And I thought he did a great job of going through the different text control, the controller. But I do want to ask a question of you. I was sitting there, I got confused. Because he's telling me about superheat, valves pop up, pulsing, opening up, closing, temperature probes, transducers. I'm like, I thought we were troubleshooting a CO2 rack. Is there any difference? Do the cases know the difference? No. Do the cases know if it's 449, 448, 513, CO2, R12?
Well, technically, yes, they do.
Yeah, program.
Case controller doesn't know. They're all
Programmed in there.
I'm not gonna tell them. It's still transducers, temperature probes, expansion valves, airflow, defrost. Everything that he talked about is still valid, yes or no? So when people say, I don't know how to work on CO2, that's a lie, yes? Because they can work downstairs. Everything Brett said is true, yes or no? And it doesn't matter the refrigerant. Yes, the 6.5 pounds per degree. Yes, the check valve. Other than that, we're good, yes? So we can't say, we don't know how to work on these. So I've got, buckle up buttercups, cause I've got, 45 minutes to do about 100 slides. What's the over under? Am I gonna make it?
Yeah.
You buckle up, you're gonna see some troubleshooting now. We gonna get stuff fixed, alright? Are we good? Let's get this stuff fixed and do me a favor. I felt sorry for Brett. What do you guys, just fell asleep? Let me know what's going on. Let's talk, let's have conversation. If we don't finish, you'll still have it. But I wanna make sure that, what I don't want you to do is sit here and I look at you and go, are we good? And you go, we're good. Then she goes outside and goes to one of her compadres. What the hell was he talking about? If you have a question, you've got Brett, you've got me, please ask the question. Amen? Are we good? All right, let's go. All right, so if I'm going to start out with CO2 booster systems, if I'm going to talk, and I don't care who the manufacturer is, L&P, Kaiser Warren, Zero Zone, it really doesn't, are they when they finally get here? It doesn't matter. You're going to have a couple of different valves, either an ICMT valve or you're going to have a CCMT valve. But it's going to be your high pressure control valve. It's what's going to monitor and help me manage the CO2. It's going to create subcooling in the mode 1. It's going to create pressure drop or change of state in mode 3. It's going to be a hold back valve in the winter, if you ever get to those temperatures. But that's what we're going to look at. So I'm just going to do a real quickie on it. I don't care if it's, so everybody's in, how many people believe everybody's in the CO2 game now? Everybody, every manufacturer, we're all in, yes? It doesn't matter who it is. So if I walk up to a rack, here's what's beautiful. Here's where I feel sorry for our technicians. This is why guys like Brett and myself, they never retire. Paul Burnett will never. Paul Burnett will retire 3 weeks after his funeral. Because I could walk into that rack and it could be an iPro. I could have a Danfoss controller, but I could have an iPro made by Ever. Excuse me, Copeland. I could have a Copeland controller in there. I could have microthermal, a 744D controller, 2 of them to handle these valves. It could be microthermal. It could be Dan. Oh, how many people dig the 326A? The best controller ever on the planet. So what did Danfoss do?
We're not making it.
Put it obsolete. The only valve I really understand now it's obsolete. I guess that means I'm obsolete. But it's being replaced with the 782. That same algorithm, the same operation, the same thought process that goes into the 782 or into the 326A is now in the 782. I just have different pins. Now instead of coming off the 326A with my flash gas bypass valve on pins 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24, I gotta go to the 208C board. Instead of coming off pins 5 and 6 on the 326A, now I have to, this is nutty. I don't know if you guys can handle this. I actually have to look at the wiring diagram and see that it's coming off of the 103 board, pin 17 and 18. But what does it mean I have to do? What is the heart? Breathe. What is the hardest thing for us?
I said read.
Oh, I thought you said breathe, because I agree. Matter of fact, somebody said, what should I do when I walk into a CO2 store? My first thought was, in your head, play Bob Marley. Don't worry, but I think everything's gonna be all right. Yes, amen? Channel your inner Bob Marley, brothers. That's what we do. Right? That's the only way to get out of this thing alive. And if I go to Corral, you go hang out with Chris Butler, he's going to preach the 300T. It's another way to do it with an EVD valve controller. By the way, anybody been in Chris Butler's class? Anybody been there? I do not sound like that, brother. Don't let him tell you that.
Damn it.
All right. So, first thing we start with. It's got to be in, garbage in on any kind of controller. Garbage in, garbage out. If I don't check the transducer, if I don't validate the transducer, if I don't have a gauge on it, if I don't validate, anybody ever heard of one of these? Everybody ever see one of these? I've got to validate my temperature probe, yes or no? I have, like Brett said, I have to make sure, if I'm using a Danfoss, I can't plug in a CPC, one's an NTC probe, one's a PCT probe. We've gotta make sure our inputs are good. Garbage in,
Garbage out.
garbage out. And that's why we gotta deal with the same thing with the case controllers. Alright, so you can see here where my temperature probes are, they've gotta be wired properly and to the right location. And believe it or not, if that screw I tied them into is loose, I have a bad input, yes? And it's simply, and sometimes, especially temperature probes, that's on the drop leg, it can come loose. If I look at one of these controllers and I see the temperature popping, I don't change the probe. First thing I do is check and make sure it's tight. Check and make sure it's tight. Understand, start simple. What Brett's saying I love? KISS. What does KISS stand for? Keep it, say that last one loud for me.
Stupid.
Yeah, you can't say that anymore, but I love saying it anyway. Right? We got to start simple. Let's quit making this harder than it has to be. Yes? How many people believe that that's what we do? Matter of fact, if you're talking to a dude, he makes it sound really complicated and hard. He's probably not as good as he thinks he is. If the dude who knows what he's doing makes it seem what? Easy. Easy. Tom Brady looked like he was on vacation half the time. Throw that touchdown over there, right? Phase loss. Watch your phase loss. Each one of these case controllers, I don't care the manufacturer, they have a normally open set of contacts. You see it right here? If I open, it's going to close as soon as I get power. The controller's going to run. If I open that circuit, I'm going to go off. I'm going to shut the high pressure control out and flash gas bypass off. Right? So remember, phase loss. And a lot of the manufacturers now are going to simply put an ice cube relay there. Brett.
Why do we have to shut down the HPV and the BGV during a power failure?
God, he's turning on me. I let him have an opportunity. He's turning on me. You asked, answer.
Because if we have 1,500 pounds in the gas cooler, and upon a power failure, if we don't shut that valve, we're going to send that flash tank to Jesus. The pressure's going to go all the way up, and essentially have a relief event.
You could get higher than 600, 650, and if you exceed 600, now we're going to cover later, if you exceed 600, you shut it, it's going to shut off and I won't be able to restart it until I bring that pressure down. Correct. Once I exceed 600 PSI. Good question. All right, phase loss monitor, inputs. We talked about every one of them, yes? Dude, start simple. If I walk up to a rack, you got a ton of these in LA, in Southern California. To me, LA is everything like south of Magic Mountain, right? But if I walk in, I have a Danfoss 326A and it says off, I'm in phase loss. I'm in phase loss because that's what it'll show me. All right, so make sure you're checking that. Again, it can be a simple ice cube relay, not really in phase loss. Compressor seems to be trying to work. Everything's shut down. I could simply have lost an ice cube relay. Start simple. The things that are most likely going to break. All right? Does this matter? You see anything different about these two transducers? The range. Remember, we're scaled on our controllers. If it says it's a 2,000-pound transducer, I'm not going to replace that with a 200-pound. Watch your zeros. Yes? Because I'm not worried about it blowing up. I'm worried about what? Who said it over here? Scaling. I scaled this in the controller. And if I change that, I don't go into the controller and change the scheduling, the scaling anyway, I'm going to get a bogus number. All right? Check your temperature probes. PT1000 is not a 34K. All right? Luckily for us, everybody's trying to go generic, and we're all going to hopefully one day get to the same probe. We're all using a PT1000, a platinum, right? So it makes it easier on the poor technician. I feel sorry for the guy who's got to have like 6 different probes in his truck. And he's got to figure out which one's which as we go through here. All right, make sure I have like, oh, by the way, you see where that says 24 with a B? I just wanna pass this along to you. If you put 120 or 240,
Magic happens.
all the magic smoke leaves. I'm just saying. How do I know that? It's not important. Leave me alone. Alright, so here's some simple alarms. These are common alarms that you may walk into. Because, you know, a lot of times when I walk, where's the first person that place everybody wants to go to when they walk into a rack?
Home.
Carburetor, was that you?
It wasn't me, no.
I'm looking at the carburetor because he's gonna bust my chops. Alright, you know from now on that's your name, right? Is that your bud?
I was tapped.
No, it's carburetor for me. Alright. Let's look at some of these common alarms, yes? These are things I'm gonna, before I go any farther on alarms, when I get an alarm in a controller, I'll get better. Hey, what, Brad, you can go nowhere now. Alright, where were we? How many times when I walk into an E2, a Danfoss, an 880, 880A, whatever, right? Is the alarm that I'm interested in the top alarm?
No.
The alarm I'm seeing right there on the top, is that the one I'm interested in? I'm interested in the first one that occurred that day, yes, or that in that series. Because I may lose something on oil or on phase loss, and what's it going to trigger? Multiple other alarms. So if I'm trying to troubleshoot this one, that's not the root. I gotta go back to the root cause, amen?
Amen.
So that's what we want to do. We always want to start at the first alarm of that series. Not if I had one trip at 5 o'clock in the morning, now I'm at 10 o'clock in the afternoon. That doesn't count. But in that series of alarms, I want to be careful for. All right, so phase loss. Like Brett said, it's going to shut us down and it's going to save us. And sometimes it's going to be a struggle to start back up if we don't trip properly. And that's why on phase loss, we have a UPS. So we have power, if it is a true phase loss, should shut those down. Low oil receiver level. It could simply be a low refrigerant. It could be the flash gas bypass is not controlling. The controller that controls the flash gas bypass valve. That's that CCM valve. He has one job, and I'll show you pictures of it in a minute. He has one job. The flash gas bypass valve has one job. And so my experience, guys, what is that one job? To maintain pressure where? In the flash tank, period. If I don't have, when I walk up to a rack, working or not, one of the first things I look at, what's my receiver with pressure? Because that tells me some things. I need to make sure he's operating. If I'm operating higher than he should be, is that a cause for my concern? It's worth an investigation, yes? I always look at ourselves as like cops, right? We're investigating a crime, right? And the way we treat our compressors is a crime, by the way. I'm just saying. All right. So flash gas bypass not operating properly. It's open too much. It's closed too much. But I will see a receiver level low. That means it could be the valve just open. It could be it's stuck. It lost its step. It's bipolar. I may have to grab my SMA 12 and drive him, right? As I investigate to see if it's the motor winding. Is it the motor winding? Look at the voltage. Look at the resistance across the windings, right? Try to drive it with your SMA 12.
Make sure it's not shorted to ground.
Make sure it's not shorted down. If I'm driving my SMA 12, how do I know if it's working or not? I can't see it. I simply look at my controller. Look at my pressure. Am I opening? Am I making a change? That's going to tell me if it's opening or closing, right? So I'm going to do all that. Well, we got discharge, high discharge pressure. Rack is off on high head. Oh my God, how many reasons could that be? It could be my high pressure control valve is too far closed. Check and make sure you're reading the 0 to 10 volt signal. That is a linear signal. It is not parabolic. It is a straight 0 to 10. If I'm reading 5 volts DC, how far open is my high pressure control valve? 50%. If you guys missed that, I would recommend an algebra class. 5 volts is 5 volts is 50% open. All right. Make sure the usual suspects. Make sure my condenser is clean. My pad. You wouldn't believe how many people have adiabatic. How many of y'all have adiabatic condenser? Any of you?
But
You understand you have to clean the pad. Everybody knows that, right?
it's 10 to 0.
What?
It's 10 to 0 volts.
0 volts?
No, 10 to 0. 10 to be in.
Carburetor. I expected it of him. I'm gonna send him in the truck next week. Alright, so, but if I clean the pads, does that mean I don't have to clean the condenser itself or the coil itself? I gotta, how many people think what I just said was silly? How many people think that I have seen dirty condensers and beautifully clean pads? I got one that got chicken sea chickens, seagulls, all over it. The pads are beautiful. They almost look new. You've got to do both. If you're kicking off on my head, check your pad, but also look at the coils. If nothing else is going on. Make sure I have water if I'm using adiabatic. I have a Gunter that's gonna pulse water. If I have a BAC, I gotta make sure the pump is running. I gotta make sure the tubes feeding it aren't clogged. Make sure they're clean. When you clean the pad, you also have to clean the little fitting, the little opening where the PVC that comes up. We just recently found the PVC pipe broke. Couldn't understand why we were kicking on high head. They broke the PVC pipe and now the water just pouring all over the pad. They had one little section of pad wet on the BAC, yes? So we gotta look at these things. These things are there for a reason and do the right thing. Check to make sure the fans are running. Make sure I'm getting the proper speed signal from my controller. It's gonna be a 0 to 10 volt signal to my adiabatic, or my ECM motors. ECM, did I just say ECM motors? So I basically said electrically commutated motors. Is that what I just said? I'm an idiot. Alright, sorry. But we gotta make sure the controllers are working. Make sure I'm getting that 0 to 10. Make sure somebody didn't pull it. My fans are running either, depends on if I set it up 0 to 10 or 10 to 0. Know which way I set it up.
Could be that
The different guys set them up.
could be the flash tank is reading at a higher pressure, reading an alarm set point, which is shutting down the HPV.
Could be tricking off on high pressure on the vessel. So these are all things I have to investigate when I'm looking at that, right? Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're gonna see some of this. High discharge pressure leads itself a lot of places. How many people agree with that? We can, the problem is, let me back up. Has anything I said yet new to you? Or are these common sense refrigeration things?
Refrigeration, yeah.
You apprentice, you first year and second year. These are things that we have to, and we carry over, doesn't matter what time, so we got a half hour, so I get to be preaching. You've got to follow the drawings, you've got to make sure you understand. Don't start jumping things out because you don't know what that solenoid does, or what that oil line is. Let me ask you a question. Where's the one of my favorites? Low oil fail. Everybody love that one? Low oil. Some of the hardest things we have to troubleshoot are oil, yes or no?
Yes.
Because sometimes by the time we get there, they're already what? Oil's already back. Because where was it? It was in the evaporator, it migrated back to our system, yes or no?
Yes.
So if I get a low oil fail, the first thing I must do
Pump it down.
is pump a gallon of oil into the and then the guy behind me, he's gonna add 2 because he's an overachiever. And then on Christmas Eve, my service manager has to go take 15 gallons of oil out. Amen? Good for it. Amen? How many of us have heard that story? We talked about it earlier today. I hear it all the time. If you're not adding gas, the oil fail is something else. It could simply be the discharge oil separator solenoid didn't energize. I get that call all the time. Guys are making it, oh, well, the mass flow of the thing into the delta Q and the, what?
Kiss.
What are you talking about? No carburetor.
So, what I'm thinking,
Go ahead. I have to come over because I don't have my hearing aids, as I said earlier, so he's not processing, my brain's not processing.
what I'm thinking, if I'm going to add 2 gallons of oil, where did it all go? Why am I not low on CO2?
Excuse me, I didn't hear that. Say that again.
If I'm 2 gallons of oil, where did it go? Why am I not low on CO2?
Because I never add oil unless I'm adding. You just said it.
Low CO2.
Oh, God, you said it.
I just wanted to pay you, I'm saying, put it out there.
Yeah, I mean, and I won't say CO2. I'll say refrigerant. Yes? This has nothing to do with CO2. This could be 448 or 12. It's, but I want you to understand something about what Brett said and what I've said. Have we done anything that's that weird, different, Star Wars? We got to quit making it harder. This is refrigeration. Learn to read your wiring diagram. 80% of your service calls are going to be electrical in nature. Has nothing to do with the refrigerant. Because CO2 at the end of the day is just another what?
Refrigerant.
No different, well, but not much. All right, high separator alarms. Discharge oil separator alarm has been energized for 30 minutes. The sensor on the bottom of the separator has been energized for 30 minutes. Does that sound like a problem? If my separator is holding oil for 30 minutes, is that a problem? What would be the easiest thing it could be? There's a solenoid that goes between the separator and the reservoir. A lot of times that high separator alarm will be followed by a low reservoir alarm. Yes? Because I put oil in it, I'm stacking, I'm not energizing that coil. Check the solenoid itself, because solenoids fail, yes or no? Solenoids fail, weakest point. Or it could be the relay has failed. Check your relays, your ice cube relays, or whatever relay. Make sure, if I have a low reservoir alarm or a high separator alarm in conjunction, 9 times out of 10 it's a restriction. It's that oil filter that's in between the two of them. Matter of fact, let me tell on recently, I just went and did a PM. I had a training. I said, okay, and if anybody's interested, I'm good for PM training and bar mitzvah. So please, wait, no, that's fine. But my guy said, hey, come help us. I said, okay. Service manager was there. He goes, my guys are so good. This is going to be one of the easiest, best PMs you've ever taught. Did my spidey senses go off? Dude, I was like on high alert now. So we pumped it down. Coalescent wasn't too bad. I said, now let's check the oil filters. Bro, I haven't put them in yet, but all 6 of them were nasty. I had them all sitting down here, and the service manager looked at me and he was all like, oh, dude, I'm sorry. I'm going to have a conversation with somebody. But then he said the thing that I had the most gratification for. He goes, you're going to take a picture of that and put it in your presentation, aren't you? You old damn Skippy. If I come out to teach you and you give me something like that, I'm going to make you famous, baby. Did he do his job? When he changed that coalescent, did he do his job every year? No, because he did, what's that? He did part of it. It's like I always say, if you don't look at your oil filters, I don't care if it's that little bitty one, whatever kind of oil system you have, if you're not changing your filters, it's like taking your truck in, getting the oil changed, and the guy goes, hey, you need to change that filter too? Nah! I've had that oil filter in there for 4 years, that's good. No, somebody needs to take your truck away. You should have known one. Give it to me. All right, so DOS solenoid, start simple. If you get a high separator alarm, it's simply because that oil filter is clogged or the solenoid is bad. Or you have something in that line. Non-condensables. How do I check for non-condensables? How do I check for non-condensables? Nobody knows how to check for non-condensables.
I do.
He doesn't count.
Okay.
All right, tell him, go ahead.
So, because there's no PT relationship, when it's in above the critical state, you'd have to run the fans just like you would any conventional system, and run it below the critical point and get it to whatever the pressure temperature it is at that point and compare it to the temperature.
On your PT chart.
Yes.
On your PT chart. Look at your, I love the Dan Foss slider app. Right, just make sure you have gauge, not absolute. But just simply, why do we get non-condensable? People ask me that all the time. Because we have a bad practice of not purging our hoses. We're charging that charging line, and we're not purging it with vapor before we put liquid in. We're not only creating dry ice, but we're putting non-condensables in. And CO2 seems to be a little bit more accessible. It happens more often. Vocabulary leaves me. Because the smaller condenser, and I'm more aware of it, because my unit's also running at a higher discharge pressure. So I'm more keenly aware of it, and so we see it. But simply, not leakage de minimis, but leakage de maximus. When you purge that condenser for non-condensables, do it like you mean it. This is not a purge. That ain't it, baby. Ah! Let it go. I got work to do. 20, 25 seconds, I don't care. You've got to get it out. Because I don't need help with head. Do you agree with that? In Southern California, I don't need help in the summer with head pressure. I'm good. All right, let's keep those things in mind. Flash tank pressure. All right, so we talked about calm. Mr. Trevor, another celebrity.
So when it's 120, you get non-condensables, and you can't do a pressure temperature relationship, what do you do then? Just let her rip?
I just let her go. If I'm convinced, because remember, so what he's alluding to is once I get to a certain, above 87 degrees, I really have no idea what the pressure is. There's no pressure temperature relationship. I have no idea. Because the structure of the gas has changed and now the densities are equal. So I really don't know. But what we've done, Hill's done, Kaiser's done, Dan Foss has done on their slider app. I think Bitzer app, I haven't checked that one out yet. But what we do is we extrapolate that value. So if I can't count on that extrapolation, I just do what Trevor did. What do I do?
Let it rip.
Let her go. It's gonna go out of there. If you're blowing it at 120 bars, 1700, that's not gonna happen because I got other relief valves that have already shut my system down to 1566. So we'll say 104 on the roof, and it's running around 1,400 pounds. And I'm gonna try to use the Bitzer app or the Dan Foss app because it's extrapolating that value. It's not giving me, because there's really no true value. But I'm gonna do it. So I will try that, but the main thing, if it's 90 degrees on the roof, I'm just doing what? What am I gonna do? Just let it go?
Rusty, what happens if you have a flash tank that
Why is them turning on me? What is this? Go ahead.
This is a good question. What happens if you have a flash tank and there's nothing that feeds directly off the top, besides maybe a pressure tap? Would you want to relieve any of the pressure because the non-condensables could get trapped on top of there?
It could, and I do have an access port. So what he's saying is if I feel that now some of those non-condensables are in the receiver and it seems to be high arbitrarily for no real reason, then I do have an access port on there as well. And remember, I'm gonna use that access port when I'm troubleshooting the system as well. If I pumped it down, which I hope to get to, I doubt it. But if I don't, I'm gonna just pump a rock down for you. Is that good? Man, sometimes flash tank, I wanna try to, I may skip around real quick because there's really some things I wanna hit. Is that good with y'all? Are y'all good with that? Because you have my whole presentation. No, you don't. Ha ha ha. You'll have it tomorrow. I'll make sure I fix that tomorrow. All right. If I look at a high pressure control valve, it can give me some of my own alarms. I may have to do an IO5. IO5 is a calibration that we have. The high pressure control valve is out of calibration. All right, high pressure control valve sits right there in the tank. It is gonna be controlled by the ICMT. Many of you probably already seen that. That's an easy valve. If it fails me, so let's say I'm running a high head for no reason, or maybe that valve is stuck closed, and I'm getting high head because it's shut. Maybe it's too far open, it's adding too much pressure in my receiver flash tank, and I have some of that going on, right? And so now I have a couple of things I can try. I can take it to manual. If that valve is, we have some here in California that we have a valve fail us. It burned up, we couldn't get one, supply issues, so we ran it for 3 months in manual. Simply hold the valve down, the button, center button, till it goes to IO5 or IO1, enter, take IO1 from a 1 to a 2. I'm now in manual, so I can run that thing without a controller. If the valve failed, it still works. There's ways I can take that valve into manual and run the system. Well, what about if the ambient changes? Well, I might have to go out there in the morning, I have it in one place. Remember, I want to see it in under transcritical, 38 to 45% open. It gets hot, I want to see it around 50, 55% open, maybe even a little lower than that. Look at the controller while you run it in manual. You can just use the arrows. I've got a power, 24 volt power. I got a 0 to 10 volt signal. I got one of these that somebody murdered. Yes, they murdered it. They put thermal paste on it and destroyed it. But what we did is, I don't know how they did it, but we were getting 0 to 10 volts off of the controller, but we were not seeing anything here. Well, I'm pretty lazy, so instead of taking the thing apart and looking for a butt splice or a bad terminal, simply disconnect the black cable. Oops, there's a magnet. Simply disconnect the black cable, go to D, which is ground, F, which is green. I have a little bitty, you know those needle kind of probes you can put on your meter? Could you not put those, take that off, put your meter on F and D, and simply look for that 0 to 10 volt signal? Look at your drawings, look at your cut sheets, look at the things that you can do, because this is in the manual. What can I do to prove out? Anybody ever pull a wire from the electrical panel all the way to the back of the rack? Yeah. How much fun is that? Dude, you have it? No, that's not it. Pull that one. No, not that one. The green one. Pull that one. Oh my God, is that painful? Yes? Simply read on the other end. This way you're checking the butt splices, you're checking the broken wires, you're checking the terminal pins that have a loose connection. And also you're checking the board. The one I was talking about, we had 0 to 10 volt there at the cable. So what was bad? The actuator was bad. The motor wasn't driving because we weren't getting the signal. Yes? I mean, it was getting the signal, it just wasn't processing the signal. Everybody see what we did? So we gotta just kind of approach these things. And this is a kind of a CO2 thing, because I'm not gonna have this unless I'm an ammonia guy. This valve's on ammonia big time. It's an expansion valve for the ammonia world. But we just have to look at one of the things, so since I'm running out of time, and here's some things I wanna warn us about service calls. Here's my ABCs of service. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal that. My 1, 2, 3s of service calls. I don't need to be sued for copyright infringement. I'm in enough trouble now as it is. But how many people when you get a call from dispatch? You're in the van, and then, hey man, I want you to go to store 73, Aldi 73, and I got the B case in the meat department running warm. Hang up. Oh shit, I know. Oh heck, I know what that is. And you start solving the equation while you're in the van. How many of you do that? We all do that, yes? I know I do. You ever solve the equation? And then you get in the store, it's gonna be so simple, I got my tool and I know what I'm doing. And I get in there and it ain't nothing to do with that. that. And I just raised it a half now, and I'm gonna lie on my service ticket, of course. But stop solving the problem before you get there, yes? Turn the Dodger game on. I'm playing in my audience there. I typically put the Braves game on, and I try not to think about it, or I try not to get too focused. Yes? Stop, slow down. The other thing is slow down. We're getting in too big a hurry. And is that when we make mistakes? When we get in a hurry? Stop being a part changer. You want to start a fight with me? Call me a parts changer. You ain't nothing but a parts changer. What? What? Because there's no bigger insult to me. Does that make sense to everybody? I'm a technician. I fix things permanently. I don't change parts arbitrarily. Are we good? If you're gonna change that component, make sure you're changing it for the right reason. Look at the voltages. Look at the operations. Look at it mechanically. Take it apart. See if that's really your issue. Yes? Yes. And the biggest thing I would say, especially for you younger guys, breathe. Sometimes I get guys call me and they're afraid they're gonna either hyperventilate or they're gonna pass out because dude, breathe. The other thing you wanna do, understand, if you want to be good at this, and those of you who are good at this, 80% of our service calls are what in nature?
Electrical.
Read the wiring diagram. So I'm gonna start something, I might get in a fight. So I'm gonna get closer to the door, just in case. I had a young apprentice, and he kept going to ground. He'd go to one side of the coil to ground, the other side to ground. I'm like, bro, what are you doing? Are you looking for a short? No, that's how you check it. What? You can't see difference of potential. You have no idea how that circuit is operating. Don't do that. Stop it. And I started showing him how to read the wiring diagram. If I have a compressor off, I'm going to take T2, 208 volt circuit. I'm going to take my black lead, I'm going to tie it to L2 or T2 on the control breaker. Then I'm going to take my red lead. If you look at my meter, I have a 6-foot red lead. So I can put my meter here, and then I go bam, right in the middle of that circuit. Yes? Yeah. If I have 208 here, this whole side of the circuit is what? It's good. I got voltage. I'm gonna go in the middle of that one. I'm gonna look for voltage here. Yes? Yeah. If it's good here, not here, my problem's in here, yes? Read your wiring diagrams. Understand them. Some of you older guys, you experienced technicians. How many of you older guys know who Charles Barkley is?
What's an older guy? Let's get that straight.
What? I keep looking at you, Carburetor, when I'm saying old guys. How many people remember Charles Barkley? Or know Charles Barkley? He's not dead. Do you remember when he played? He actually played for the 76, yes. Remember when he played for the 76ers? Right out at Auburn? Remember that? Yeah. Does anybody remember when he threw that dude out of the window? When he was a young dude? I was a young dude. He threw this cat out of the window in a bar, and he got mad. Threw a guy out of the window, picture window in a bar. I thought that was kind of cool, kind of Western, kind of Clint Eastwood, but whatever. So they went to Sir Charles, and they said, Charles Barkley, you shouldn't do stuff like that because you are a role model. To which Sir Charles said, negative. I'm not a role model. Your parents are role models. And when I first heard that as a young, dumb kid, I said, you tell him, Charles, you go, boy. Until I got a wee bit older. And then I understood Charles Barkley doesn't get that choice. Does he? No. The minute he put that 76 jersey on, he became a what? Role model. His only choice is if he's going to be a
Good one or a bad one?
good role model or a bad role model, yes?
Yes.
So what the hell's this story got to do with you?
Same with us.
I clean toilets, I don't know.
Carburetor on my calcium. I'm not putting my apprentice with carburetor. No, he did all right. But
You can always teach her what not to do.
whatever he did. Sometimes that's a good lesson too. But the moral of the story is what? Are all of us good teachers?
No.
No.
Absolutely not. Nothing will ruin a young technician more than a what?
Bad
A
mentor.
bad teacher. So every one of you are a teacher. The only choice you get,
Good or bad?
am I gonna be a good teacher? Am I show them how to read the meter right? Am I gonna let them do it? Am I gonna go to that E2 and do this? All right, kid, here you go. See, that's how you fix it.
Just
Then the poor kid's going,
clear the alarms.
and yeah, here you are. He's already scared the hell of you, because every time he talks to you, you yell at him. They're not the same as old grade panthers, yes? Is that right?
You gotta give her Kleenex at a time.
And it doesn't matter. How many, I see guys all the time, well, they need to toughen up. Well, brother, that ain't happening. So you have a choice. Be a good role model, adapt and overcome, as we did in the Army, or be a bad role model and destroy that kid. And next thing you know, that kid's gonna be, if you destroy a young technician, the next question he's gonna ask you, you want fries with that? Nobody got that right. But, so, since I don't have enough time, I do want to end with that. I do want to tell guys, relax. CO2 is not that hard. The amp draws, the electronics. If I blow a little bit of CO2, is that okay?
Yes.
Nobody died. Unless, wait, speaking of dying, I feel I need to cover this. If you, remember when Brett was telling you to vent CO2 out little by little and watch your gauge go down, and that's how you check and see if there's liquid in there? I had a dude, I was on the roof with a kid. We were doing that, we were gonna change the dryer. He's venting it, the whole class is there. He's venting his plug, his hose stopped blowing CO2 out.
Oh, shit.
And he goes, my hose are plugged.
It's
And I
coming.
promise you, he did this. He grabbed the hose and he looked at it. What I should have done is absolutely nothing. I should have, but I hit his hand. It's like when my wife got her first gun and she went, is this the right way to do this? Ah! Took her gun away from her. She got 30 days without a gun. But what was that kid? What happened as soon as we moved that hose? The dry ice that came out of that plugged that hose, sublimated, and did what? Pop. He would have got hit in the head. Understand when you're venting CO2 liquid, dry ice is going to form in that hose. It's going to plug your hose, shut it down real quick. It'll pop, and you get this popping sound as it comes out. That's normal. Don't look inside the hose.
And have your PPE.
Even with your PPE. And if you do look down the hose, when you're venting CO2, have your compadre film it. And then send it to me. Because I'll make him famous. Amen? All right, I wish I had more time. This is some of the subjects we could spend the whole day on. But, so I don't have that time. I just want to reinforce what Brett said, what a great job he did. And I want to see, on my part, quit overthinking this. Amen?
Amen.
It is not that, look at your wiring diagrams. If you don't know how to read them, take a class. Know how to use your controller. Don't blame the program. If you say the program's wrong, and you call Paul, tell him why it's wrong. What you see. Amen?
Amen.
All right. And quit making phone calls till you look at it. Don't. How many of you senior guys have had this happen to you? This is the last one. Any senior guys had this happen to you? You had a couple junior techs, and you had your junior tech call you, and you're still driving down the road or whatever. He calls you up, and he goes, hey, I'm working on this coughing case. one of my techs said this. He called me and goes, I'm working on this coffin case and I don't know what's wrong. I said, well, what have you done?
I'm not there yet.
What, have you put a gauge on it? What have you done? Well, not at the store yet. He told me that. He goes, you hang up on me?
Hold on. Didn't you just say you have to be gentle with him?
I didn't say, look, sometimes you just,
Throw the kid.
sometimes they fix it stupid. Sometimes you just gotta hang up on it. You can't fix stupid, but you hang up on it. All right, thank you very much.